boosting your Lamplighter. Boosting your Lamplighter entry, which is a perennial topic for us these days at NESHCo, because we find that a lot of people still get a little nervous about preparing their Lamplighters. And this way we can offer a few tips from people who have done it before, and maybe help ease your anxiety and help you get started. So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. My name is Susan McDonald. I am the board mentor for the executive board at NESHCo, and I'm a long time competitor in the Lamplighter category. I've won a couple. I actually just moved offices recently, Michaela, and unpacked some ribbons. So before we got certificates, we actually had ribbons, you know, like you see at the county fair and everything. So I have some of those. I go back that far. But also with us today is David Ball, who's president of Ball Consulting Group and the recipient of last year's Owen J. McNamara Excellence in Writing Lamplighter Award. So he will be able to talk to you about his experience too. Welcome to you, David.
Thank you, Sue.
Today, we're going to be providing an overview of the Lamplighter Awards competition and sharing some simple tricks and tips to set you up for success. We've invited you all to a Zoom meeting to have an open forum discussion, share ideas, and ask questions. So please feel free to ask your questions live or drop them in the chat. Next slide. So we'll start with the basics, the deadlines and pricing. Here are the important. I'm sorry, Michaela. I'm reading the notes and it doesn't make sense. But we just got past the standard deadline, which was yesterday, and we have the Monday, February 13th is the actual final deadline. So we move quickly to get submissions reviewed and scored. Winners will be contacted in early March, but we all have to wait until the actual Lamplighter Award Gala at the conference to reveal winner placements. So you'll find out that you won an award in your category, but you won't know whether it's the gold, silver, or honorable mention. The Lamplighter Gala will be held at the 2023 annual conference in Boston on Wednesday, June 3rd. Next slide. In 2022, we introduced a limited Lamplighter category to celebrate the annual conference theme each year. So for this year, the category embodies the conference theme of the next revolution. This theme looks closely at change, both revolutionary, impactful, and immediate, and evolutionary, methodical, and adaptive change. As communicators, it's ultimately important to understand what is happening in our communities and how to act appropriately. This entry should focus on what tactics you utilize to successfully connect with your community. How was this done differently in the past? What were the seen or unseen needs of your community? And how did your vision take shape over time? Next slide. Successful entries keep in mind these three components: the strategy of the project or initiative. What was your goal and your vision going in? The creative thought process and collateral. And of course, the results of the campaign, both qualitative and quantitative. Next slide. So we decided to kind of do the anatomy of a Lamplighter entry to kind of break things down for people who've never done an application before. There's 4 key sections of the Lamplighter submission form. The first is the situation analysis, which sets the stage for your campaign. What was the purpose of the project? What were the needs, wants, and challenges? In other words, why did you do it? Why did you need to do it? The second, it kind of stems from that. Now that we understand why your project exists, we want to understand your mission. The statement of objectives helps us to understand exactly what the goals and objectives were for the project. What was your intention? Number 3, program planning and strategy will answer how. How did you accomplish these goals? Did you accomplish your original goals, or did your plan change over time? Describe your thought process and key decisions that led to the results. And lastly, the all-important results. It's time to brag and tell us your successes. Be specific. Use charts, data, and even anecdotal feedback is supportive. This information is, of course, confidential and will not be publicly shared, but let the numbers speak for themselves. Next slide. Sorry, I was not changing myself. The rules of submission. What are the guiding rules of a submission? Start with the problem. Whether it's as simple as getting a message out or navigating crisis communications, we need to understand the problem before we can see the solution. How did your project start? Then you think strategically, but be sure to guide us through your thought process. You're telling us the story of your work. What do you want us to take away from your project? Then get organized and make a plan. The best way to approach your entry is to think ahead about what key points you want to highlight to the judges. You'll then create your entry. It doesn't have to be done in one sitting. You can save and pick up where you left off. Remember to stay on message. Don't forget those key points you want the judges to take home. And then finally, measure the results. Collect the data and feedback and package it up for the judges. Next slide. What are some pro tips to keep in mind? Outline objectives, goals, audiences, strategy, and execution ahead of your writing submission. Of writing your submission. Think of it as writing your papers in college where you did an outline. This is where you can just, list all the elements that you need to include and make sure you have everything organized. Then you want to show the judges the data. Even if you didn't achieve all your goals or even hit your original objectives, what made this campaign successful and what did you learn? Allow for time to develop and review your entry. Again, you don't have to write the submission all at once. It's always helpful to start a draft and then give some time to think and review it. Then you will choose the best category entry for each category, but also think about how your project fits into different categories. Can you look at your campaign from a different angle? Does it fit just one category or multiple? And finally, the judges reviewing the Lamplighters are our peers. So think about what you would want to see to fully understand and appreciate the campaign. Next slide. Use results terminology that everybody understands. Make your entries easy to understand. While we do match judges with their preferred categories and areas of expertise, there will be judges of different knowledge levels. Make sure to touch on the results terminology that everyone understands. Marketing results, response rate, ROI, and brand awareness. Share the click rates, engagement rates, measurable results that demonstrate your success. Operational results, show the number of appointments, the volume of patients.
Quarterly e-newsletter targeted to providers.
And patient satisfaction scores and comments are always great to share. Strategic results. Show if sales increased. Was this campaign profitable? Next slide, please. I just wanted to pause right now. We're going to go into some frequently asked questions, and I didn't know if anybody had any questions at this point. If I am speaking a little too quickly, please somebody raise a hand and let me know. That tends to be a problem for me, but okay, seeing none. Next slide, please. So in some of the categories, you'll have to decide whether it is an in-house or an agency submission. So what does this mean and does it matter? you have to determine whether your submission was produced by hospital marketing or PR staff members and team, or did you utilize a paid outside agency to create at least part of it? This is an important and required field. The categories are subdivided so that in-house entries are judged separately from agency produced. Next slide, please. So here's a question. Our ad agency is located in New England, but one of our hospitals is located out of state. Can our agency enter our work for them in the Lamplighters? The answer is yes. The competition is open to all public relations and marketing professionals employed by New England healthcare institutions, health plans, and agencies. Next slide. What's the time frame for the entries? We'd like to enter a campaign that was started in late 2021, but we don't know if it's eligible for the 2023 Lamplighters. What's the time frame for campaigns to qualify? Eligible entries must have been produced and or completed and must include measured results between October 1, 2021 and January 31st, 2023. Next slide, please. How to pick a category. Our campaign would be considered for 2 or more categories. How do we pick which category is the best fit? Can we submit to multiples? Yes, your campaign doesn't need to be limited to just one category. We welcome submissions to multiple categories. Just be mindful about the criteria for each and tailor your entry accordingly. So this isn't a time to necessarily cut and paste your entries from one category to another. You really need to think about the fact that different judges will be looking at them and there's different criteria that they'll be judging based on. So you will need to tweak it, but you can certainly apply in more than one category. Next slide, please. How about the judging? How are they judged? NESHCo reaches out to sister organizations, other members of SHSMD, and to recruit our peer review judges. Each entry is judged by at least 2 judges who are responsible for judging the entire category. So you'll be judged against the other applicants in the same category. Judges are then assigned based upon their professional experience and expertise. So in my experience, I'm a writer, and so I will typically ask to do the written categories or brochures and that sort of thing, which is my special area. NESHCo is also frequently asked, here we go, to recruit volunteers to help peer review for these sister societies. And we do actually need to do quite a few of these because we require so many judges because we have so many entries. So if you were ever asked to become a peer review judge, to help us do the reciprocal judging, it would be a wonderful opportunity to kind of get your, to see what other people are doing and get an idea of some of the judging that does go into these. And it also helps frame your applications going forward. Next slide, please. The Best in New England Lamp, who's eligible for this? The Best in New England winner is selected from the 5 top scoring gold entries. So each category has a gold, and a silver, and the opportunity, I should say, to win a gold, a silver, and like an honorable mention level. So the top 5 scores for the gold entries and the gold winners are then put together, and these entries are reviewed again by a separate panel of judges who then rank and vote for their choice for the Best of New England. Next slide, please. The Excellence in Writing, the Owen J. McNamara, that's David's prize that he brought home last year. Who's eligible for that? The Excellent in Writing winner is selected from the top 5 scoring gold entries across all of the Excellence in Writing categories. These entries are reviewed again by a separate panel of judges who rank and vote their choice for the final winner. Next slide, please. So we are, as I said before, fortunate to have the 2022 Excellence in Writing Award winner, David Ball, with us today. Ball Consulting Group received the Excellence in Writing Award for the entry Reversing the Public Charge Rule in the category Excellence in Writing Other. So to share a little bit about the story, the entry, in February 2021, Ball Consulting Group placed an op-ed in Morning Consult for CEO to join the chorus of activists calling on President Biden to reverse a harmful expansion of the public charge rule and restore immigrants' access to life-saving public benefits. The rule was rescinded in March 2021. I'll now pass this over to David to share a few comments on his entry and his experience with the Lamplighters.
Thank you, Sue. I hope everyone can hear me okay. We've been doing Lamplighters. I think first of all, I've been a member of NESHCo for almost as long as Sue. I don't remember getting any ribbons, but we do have a wall full of awards to show for our time doing submissions. I think that I've learned a few things over the years from our submitting and from the awards that we've gotten. And I just wanted to share those with you today. The first is choose your best work. There's you may have several things that you really think are award worthy, and maybe you'll do an award on each of those, but make sure that what you're submitting, really, first of all, squarely fits within the category that you're submitting it, and really make sure it's something that you're very proud of. Because if you have that kind of passion and enthusiasm for the project, whatever it was, then it's more likely to impress the judges, I believe. Secondly, the one thing that we always are very careful about doing is really lining up the objectives with the results. So, for example, a situation analysis should definitely bring the judge into the environment and should be written well and dramatically to paint the picture that you were facing as an organization or that your client was facing. But at the end of the day, the objectives of the project really need to correspond with the steps that you took to address the issue, which would be the program planning and strategy, and also with the results, so that the results of the project, even if the project itself wasn't a complete success, the results, and it really should be, if you're, in my opinion, if you're submitting, it really should be something where you can show a cause and effect of the work that you took led to a particular result. Those two should really correspond very closely, in my opinion. And when it comes to the results, you really want to use all of the data points that you can, bring in all of the evidence. We try to really show the impact of what we've done. And that impact can be felt in a number of ways. First of all, it can be the actual, for instance, the media result you got. So in the case of ours last year, we chose something that was published in a national publication that doesn't publish a lot of op-eds. And then we were able to also show the broader impact that it had. We're not saying that our op-ed led to President Biden signing the repeal of the public charge rule, but it was one voice, and one voice has impact. So to be able to show that what we did ultimately led to a major change in public policy, I think probably helped impress the judges that this was a worthy submission. Of course, I don't know exactly what went on in the judging room, but that would be my guess. And lastly, don't be shy. Look at all of your metrics. Look at shares on social media. Look at website visits, comments in response to a story, that online comments, reader comments. All of those can be brought in. A note from your CEO saying this has been incredibly impactful for us. That can be redacted, and submitted, attached to the entry as well. If you're in an agency, a note from your client that this really validates the work that the agency was engaged to do. All of those things have merit. So, in short, choose your best work. Be able to frame what you were tasked with doing and correspond that work to the results. and use ample results and as much data as you can to make your case. I think those are the three really important things to remember.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. I remember there's certain categories, especially in the writing ones, that it's hard to show results. You know, you can get some pickup and everything. And now these days with the news blogs and everything, you can get hits and link click-throughs. But I remember doing a lot of anecdotal support for what we did. And again, it also helps just show the breadth of the impact. You said that the CEO saying that this is really helpful, impactful for us. That's just great feedback.
Yes, thank you.
Does anybody on the call have any questions that David and I could answer for you? Has anybody done a Lamplighter before? Would this be the first time for some people, or just wanting to sharpen your applications? It does get a little hot there, the competition.
Sue, I might add, if I may, that so in addition to doing Lamplighters, you know, we do other awards as well when they're appropriate. But my memory of doing awards goes back to before I owned my own agency, which is now I've owned the Ball Consulting Group for 19 years, and I worked at an agency years before that, where Lamplighters and the like were written at I recall one award being due at like 9 a.m, not midnight, and I remember literally being asked by the agency owner to pull an all-nighter to do the submissions, and we had 4 or 5 submissions, and literally we worked through the night. And I remember driving to Waltham, where they were due at the former Schwartz Communications. This was actually a bell ringer, not a Lamplighter, but we dropped it off, and actually several of the awards won. But the advice I would have is don't put yourself in that situation, or your employees. If you have employees who are working on it, it's really not fair to folks. And you'll do your best work if you're really fresh, and if you really have time to, don't wait for the 2 hours with a deadline to figure out where that report is or where that email. Just try to get ahead of it so that you can submit your best work.
Well, and it's helpful too with the online application that you can put information in there and then sit with it and go back. So a lot of times, I will load up all the basic stuff into all of them, and then I'll go back and just one at a time fill in the actual challenge statements. But I don't usually hit submit right away. Like, I sit with it for a little while. I don't know if you do the same. I think that's a writer thing too, right?
Always, because you can always find a better way to write or express something.
Yes.
I've never like read something and said, okay, I don't have a single change to that. Like, every time, even with outside of the awards, with the work that we do, I always am kind of rereading to see what is the one change we can make that's just going to maximize the impact. So I absolutely sit with it, I would say.
Yeah. Do you outline as well?
So we do, we really first talk about it. Do we have work that is worthy of the award, and then which work is it, and then how can we really make the case that what we're submitting is absolutely award-winning? So do we have, we can't just have a sense that it really, had impact. We have to, how do we measure it? How can we know that this was important? So I think that is critical, is having a sense of where you're going with the award. Yes,
agree. I've found that and of course it's too late for you guys for this tip for this year, but I have found that through the year, when I do a project that I really feel had an impact and has great numbers or just really felt good, I create a file and I will stash them in there, because sometimes at the end of the year like this, it's like, okay, well, what did I do that's worthy of submitting?
I do the exact same thing, Sue. I usually share it when I see an incredible result. I share it with my team and say, this is for the Lamplighters. And then I have a file on my computer, and that's the first place I go when the call for entries comes out.
Yes, yes. Great minds, David. Or just a lot of experience trying to sit there and go through all the old files trying to find what it is that you want to submit.
Absolutely.
We in our team at Hartford Healthcare, we create a smart sheet, and it used to be an Excel spreadsheet. Now everybody uses smart sheet, but because we want to see what everybody's applying, what everybody's ideas are. So we did that back at the first call for entries. We created the smart sheet, people started populating in it. And then we had a meeting, like you said, to talk about things like, was this really as good as it could be? Maybe we should submit this instead. And sometimes seeing other people's ideas will spark people to remember something that they didn't save during the year that they might want to submit. So we have always gone at it with a plan like that. But I find that I don't tend to write an outline. So that's one thing that and some of them, I think if they're more complicated, I don't do campaigns myself. I think a campaign would definitely need an outline. But when I'm doing an application for, a press release or a blog story that I wrote, I don't tend to, because it seems to be much more obvious to me.
I think that's right. And we also tend to not submit for campaigns, although we have in some years past. But what I would tell folks who are new to the process is you don't have to start with the hardest. I don't have the data, so I don't know which campaigns actually draw them. Michaela probably does, but which campaigns draw the most submissions. But we know that which categories draw the most submissions. But we know the campaigns, the PR campaigns are, always have heavy competition. So if you're new to the process and just want to dip your feet into the water, dip your toe in the water, you could start with a category that is a little more off the beaten path. And again, you want to have good data and good results, but that may be a way to start with the process rather than jumping into, a multifaceted campaign where it's a much more complex submission.
That's a great idea. Great advice.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I will jump in and say, off the top of my head, the number one categories that get the most submissions are internal communications and service line marketing.
Yeah, excellent.
We do have a question that went into the chat that's sort of on the flip side of this conversation. So we've talked a bit about how we can plan ahead and prepare for our Lamplighter submissions. But of course, at this point, our final deadline is February 13th, so it's coming up pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Do we have any suggestions for those that are submitting and don't really have the time to chip away at it, with only a few days left?
I haven't started any of mine, so if that makes anybody feel better, I think I have 4 that I'll be doing. But I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't be too discouraged by the fact that the deadline's less than a week away, because there have been some that I've done pretty close to the deadline and done myself. Just looked at all the data, shared it internally for edits and then submitted it. So I wouldn't let that discourage you at all. And we usually only do, unlike most organizations, we don't submit in multiple categories, which I suppose is probably a high risk strategy, but we go for one category where we think we have the best work. And that's just what we do. So I always say to folks, let's get it done by the early deadline, just to get it out of the way so it's not hanging over our heads. And our team didn't hit the early deadline, but definitely had it to me well before yesterday's regular deadline. And I just was too busy. So I will take that and be working on it over the next few days to be sure we make next week's deadline. And I think Michaela had said to me that the majority of the submissions do actually come in the late deadline, which I guess isn't a surprise knowing human nature of procrastination. So I would say don't let that stop you. Few hours, if you have a couple hours here or there, I think you could, if the results are there, you could have a substantial submission in that time.
I also think that once you start, I think that sometimes, especially if you've never done one before, or if it's a bigger one than you've done, that the thought of starting is scarier than actually starting. So once
That's
you
right.
start into it, it just flows, I think, because it's basically what you probably had to tell your CEO when you wanted to, use the money in the budget to do this campaign, or to, promote, what you were telling the people in the service line when you were coming up with the thoughts that you wanted to execute for them to promote the service line. So, I mean, this is something that you've done, and it's just a matter of sitting down and starting to let it come out.
I think that's some great advice. And I will just echo that if you haven't started your Lamplighter Awards, you're not alone. We do get quite a few right at the end. And like Sue was saying, I think as soon as you start it, you'll be surprised that a lot of the questions that we ask in the application are, you already know intrinsically, this is your project, your campaign. So you know the details.
Mm-hmm. And as a judge for other organizations' awards, I know that they don't have to be overwritten. These aren't theses. Theses? These aren't term papers that you have to, write a certain amount on. If you can say it in a short, a short paragraph or two, and your numbers and your statistics are there, then you're done. You don't have to overthink it and overwrite it. I've seen in the same category ones that are very simple and to the point and effective projects, and ones that were maybe as effective, but just wrote a lot more, and it's unnecessary. You don't have to put it all out there, right? Tight, which might help.
Do we have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can drop them in the chat and we can read them out loud. But I think we'll do last call for any questions that people have.
Well, this was a shorter than some of them have been in the past, but David, I think you gave some great, very, succinct advice, and I hope that people, everybody on the call, gleaned something out of the tips and the guidelines and David's experience, and get your lamplighters in, and good luck.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for taking the time, David.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michaela, for organizing.
Thanks, everyone.